The gunshot wound in her side should have killed her within the hour, but Georgia Jenkins was still breathing when Augustus Drake found her collapsed against the stagecoach wheel 3 miles outside Eagle Pass, Texas, blood soaking through her torn calico dress like spilled wine on cotton. He had been tracking the bandits who hit the stage since dawn, following the vultures circling in the scorching August sky of 1878, expecting to find nothing but corpses and empty strongboxes. What he found instead was a woman whose green eyes flickered open long enough to whisper, "Help me," before unconsciousness claimed her again. Augustus dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the dusty ground with purpose. The stagecoach driver and the other passengers were already dead, their bodies scattered like broken dolls across the Texas scrubland. But this woman, this stranger with copper hair matted to her forehead with sweat and blood, she still had a pulse beneath his calloused fingers. He pressed his bandana against the wound, watching crimson bloom through the fabric, and made a decision that would alter the course of his entire existence. "You hold on now," he told her, though she could not hear him. "I have got you." The ride back to Eagle Pass tested every ounce of his skill as a horseman. He held her in front of him in the saddle, one arm locked around her waist to keep her from sliding sideways, the other hand managing the reins while his horse navigated the rough terrain at a pace that was almost reckless. She was light in his arms, too light, and he could feel the fever already beginning to build in her body. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the landscape into shimmering waves of heat, and Augustus pushed his mount harder. Dr. Samuel Morrison met them at the door of his practice, already rolling up his sleeves. The gray-haired physician had seen more than his share of violence in Eagle Pass, a rough border town where cattle drives met railroad ambition and Mexican bandits crossed the Rio Grande with regularity. He took one look at the woman in Augustus's arms and pointed toward the back room. "Table. Now, how long ago was she shot?" "Cannot say for certain. 3 hours, maybe 4 based on how far the stage got before the attack." Augustus laid her down with surprising gentleness for a man whose reputation involved more broken bones than tender mercies. Dr. Morrison cut away her dress without ceremony, exposing the wound. The bullet had entered just below her ribcage on the left side. "She is lucky. Looks like it went clean through. Unlucky that she is burning up already. Infection is setting in fast in this heat." Augustus stood back while the doctor worked, cleaning and stitching with practiced efficiency. He should have left. His job was done. He had found a survivor and brought her to help. The bandit's trail was growing colder with every passing minute. But something kept his boots planted on that rough wooden floor, something in the way she had looked at him in that single moment of consciousness, a desperation that went deeper than physical pain. "She is going to need someone with her through the night," Dr. Morrison said, washing his hands in a basin. "The fever is going to get worse before it gets better, if it gets better at all. I have other patients to see, and my nurse is visiting her sister in San Antonio. You know anyone who could sit with her?" Augustus removed his hat, running a hand through dark hair that had not seen a proper cut in months. At 26, he had lived enough lifetimes for 3 men. He had been a ranch hand, a scout, a sometimes lawman when the money was right. He had never been a nursemaid. "I will stay." The doctor raised an eyebrow but did not question it. "Keep her cool with wet cloths. Get water in her when you can. And Augustus, she is going to say things that do not make sense. Fever dreams, do not let them disturb you." As the sun set over Eagle Pass, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Augustus pulled a chair beside the narrow bed where Georgia lay. Her breathing had become labored, each exhale a soft moan. He dampened a cloth in the water basin and laid it across her forehead, watching as her eyelids fluttered but did not open. The fever took hold completely after midnight. Her body went rigid, back arching off the mattress, and a name tore from her throat with such anguish that Augustus felt it in his chest. "Thomas, Thomas, please." He pressed his hands to her shoulders, holding her steady. "Easy now, you are safe." But she could not hear him. She was somewhere else entirely, trapped in memories that fever had unlocked. "Do not leave me," she sobbed, tears streaming from beneath her closed eyelids. "Thomas, you promised we would go west together." Augustus kept the cloth cool on her forehead, kept his voice low and steady even though she could not perceive it. "You are going to be all right. I am here." Another name came an hour later, this one sharp with terror. "Margaret, Margaret, run." Her hands clutched at the thin blanket, twisting it into knots. "Oh God, Margaret, the fire!" He caught her hands in his, feeling how her fingers burned with heat. Her pulse raced beneath the delicate skin of her wrist. "Shh," he murmured, the sound instinctive, the kind of gentle noise he might make to a spooked horse. "No fire here. You are safe in Eagle Pass." Through the long hours of that first night, more names spilled from her lips. David, Sarah, Elizabeth. Each one delivered with different shades of grief, loss, longing. Augustus held her through every single one, his strong arms keeping her from thrashing when the dreams turned violent, his voice providing an anchor even when she could not understand his words. By dawn, his shirt was soaked with sweat from the close heat of the room, and George's fever had climbed even higher. Dr. Morrison returned with the sunrise, checking her pulse and shaking his head. "It is going to be touch and go. The next 48 hours will tell the story." He looked at Augustus, noting the exhaustion in the younger man's face. "You should get some rest." "I will rest when she is through the worst of it." The second night proved harder than the first. Georgia's fever dreams intensified, and she fought him when delirium convinced her he was someone else, someone dangerous. "Get away from me," she screamed, her voice raw and broken. "I will not go back. You cannot make me go back." Augustus caught her wrists as gently as he could, pinning them to prevent her from tearing at her stitches. "Nobody is making you do anything. Georgia, you are safe. Listen to my voice. You are safe." She went limp suddenly, all the fight draining out of her, and began to weep with a hopelessness that cut deeper than any blade. "Papa," she whispered. "Papa, I am so sorry. I tried so hard." He released her wrists and gathered her against his chest instead, letting her cry into his shirt. It was improper, scandalous even, for an unmarried man to hold an unmarried woman like this. But there was nobody to witness it except the moon through the window, and propriety seemed like a distant concern when measured against raw human suffering. "You have nothing to be sorry for," he told her, one hand smoothing over her hair. "Nothing at all." On the third day, the fever broke. Augustus was drowsing in his chair, his body finally giving in to exhaustion, when he heard her voice, small and confused and blessedly lucid. "Who are you?" His eyes snapped open to find her staring at him, those green eyes clear for the first time since he had found her. He sat up straight, suddenly aware of how he must look, 3 days of stubble on his jaw, his clothes rumpled and stained. "Augustus Drake. I found you after your stage was attacked. You have been fevered for near 3 days now." She processed this slowly, her gaze moving around the unfamiliar room. "The others," he shook his head. She closed her eyes, fresh tears sliding down her temples. "I thought maybe that part was the dream. I am sorry." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Georgia opened her eyes again, looking at him with new intensity. "You stayed with me through the fever. Doctor needed someone to watch over you, did I?" She hesitated, color rising in her pale cheeks. "Did I say things?" I sometimes get dreams when I am ill." Augustus stood, moving to pour her a cup of water. He brought it to her lips, helping her drink. "You said some names. People you have known, I reckon. Nothing to concern yourself with." But something in his expression must have given away the depth of what he had witnessed, because Georgia looked away, shame written across her features. "I am sorry you had to hear whatever I said. No need for apologies. Fever makes people say all manner of things." He set the cup aside. "Do you have family I should send word to? Someone who will be worried about you?" "No." The single word was soft but final. "Nobody." Over the following week, as Georgia slowly recovered her strength, Augustus found himself inventing reasons to visit Dr. Morrison's practice. He brought fresh bread from the bakery, claiming the doctor had mentioned his patient needed better food. He stopped by to report that the sheriff had caught 2 of the bandits who attacked the stage. He offered to help move her to the boarding house once she was well enough to leave the doctor's care. Georgia watched him with those perceptive green eyes, and gradually, her wariness began to thaw. On the 8th day, when Augustus arrived with a book he thought she might enjoy, she patted the edge of the bed in invitation. "Sit with me. Tell me about Eagle Pass. I am going to need work once I am on my feet again, and I do not know this town at all." He sat, hat in his hands, and told her about the town on the Rio Grande. How it served as a crossing point between Texas and Mexico, how cattle drives passed through on their way north, how the railroad was coming and everyone believed it would bring prosperity. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed a sharp mind behind the pretty face. "What were you doing on that stage?" he asked when she had exhausted her curiosity about Eagle Pass. Georgia's fingers pleated the edge of her blanket. "Running away, if I am honest. I was a schoolteacher in Louisiana, in a small town you have never heard of. There was a man there, Thomas." She paused, and Augustus recognized the name from her fever dreams. "We were engaged to be married. But 2 weeks before the wedding, he left town with Margaret, my cousin and closest friend. They took what money I had saved, along with a considerable sum from his employer. I was left with nothing but questions and shame. That is a hard thing. The town made it impossible to stay. Everyone looked at me with pity or suspicion, wondering what I had done to drive him away. So I sold everything I had left and bought a ticket west, thinking I could start fresh somewhere new." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Instead, I got shot and lost even the little I was carrying." Augustus felt anger kindle in his chest for this woman's suffering, for the casual cruelties that had been visited upon her. "You will start fresh here. I will help you." "Why?" She looked at him directly, searching his face. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." He met her gaze and found he could not look away. "Maybe I do not have a reason that makes sense, but I found you out there, and I held you through the worst of the fever, and somewhere in all that, I started to care what happens to you." Color flooded her cheeks again, but this time it was not from shame. "Augustus Drake, are you always this forward? Only when it is the truth." Dr. Morrison released Georgia from his care 3 days later with instructions to take things slowly and return if the wound showed any signs of infection. Augustus had arranged a room for her at Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house, a respectable establishment run by a widow who had strict rules about male visitors and a kind heart beneath her stern exterior. He carried Georgia's few belongings up to her room, things he had purchased for her since she had lost everything in the robbery. A few dresses, a brush, some basic necessities. It was not much, but it was a start. "Thank you," Georgia said, standing in the doorway of her new room, "for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you. No repayment needed." He set down the bundle and turned to face her. "But I was hoping I could call on you, properly I mean, once you are feeling better. Her smile transformed her face, chasing away the shadows that had lingered there. "I would like that very much." True to his word, Augustus called on Georgia 3 days later, cleaned up and wearing his best shirt. Mrs. Fletcher served as chaperone, sitting in the corner of the parlor with her knitting while they talked. But even with the widow's presence, Augustus found himself captivated by Georgia's intelligence and humor, the way she listened with complete attention when he spoke about his work, his hopes of one day owning his own ranch. "I grew up on a farm in Tennessee," he told her. "My father died when I was 14 and my mother followed him a year later. I worked whatever jobs I could find, saved every penny. This land out here, it is rough and dangerous, but a man can make something of himself if he has the will. And you have the will." "I do. Just been waiting for the right moment, I suppose. The right reason to put down roots." Their eyes met across the small parlor, and something unspoken passed between them. Mrs. Fletcher cleared her throat meaningfully, and they both looked away, but the awareness remained. Georgia found work as a teacher at Eagle Pass's small schoolhouse within 2 weeks. The previous teacher had left abruptly to get married, and the town was desperate for someone educated and patient. She proved to be both, winning over the students with her gentle authority and the parents with her dedication. Augustus made it a habit to walk her home each afternoon when the school day ended. Eagle Pass could be rough, especially as evening approached and the saloons filled with cowboys and drifters. With Georgia beside him, those walks became the highlight of his day. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their pasts in careful increments, building trust like laying bricks for a foundation. One evening in late September, as they walked past the general store, Georgia stopped to admire a bolt of blue fabric in the window. Augustus noticed the longing in her expression. "You should get some," he suggested. "Have it made into a dress." She shook her head. "I need to save my wages. Winter is coming and I will need warmer clothes." The next day, Augustus bought the fabric along with thread and buttons to match. He left it on the boarding house porch with a note that said simply, "For you." Georgia appeared at his rented room that evening, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You cannot keep buying me things. I can do what I like with my own money. Augustus." She stepped closer and he caught the scent of lavender soap. "People will talk. Let them talk." He reached out, tucking a strand of copper hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, perhaps too intimate for an unmarked couple, but neither of them pulled away. "Georgia, I know it has only been a few weeks. I know you might think I am moving too fast. But I am 26 years old and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." Her breath caught. "How do you feel about me?" "Like I was wandering through the desert and suddenly found water. Like everything before I met you was just waiting for you to arrive." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "I am in love with you, Georgia Jenkins. Have been since that first night, holding you through the fever dreams, wishing I could fight all your demons for you. You heard me say terrible things. I heard you say names of people who hurt you, people you have lost, and I wanted to gather up all that pain and carry it so you would not have to." He searched her eyes. "If you do not feel the same, tell me now. I will step back. But if there is even a chance you might come to love me too, I want to know." Georgia rose up on her toes, bringing her face close to his. "Augustus Drake, I already love you. I think I started loving you in those fevered dreams, when I could not see you but I could hear your voice telling me I was safe. I fell in love with your kindness and your strength, and the way you look at me like I am something precious." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, his hands sliding from her face to her waist. She melted into him, her fingers curling into his shirt. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and searching and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Augustus rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," she laughed, the sound slightly breathless. "You said you did not want me to think you were moving too fast. I changed my mind. Why wait when I know what I want? Georgia, marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel alone or scared or hurt again." "Yes," she kissed him again, quick and joyful. "Yes, Augustus, I will marry you." They were wed in the small church on the edge of Eagle Pass 6 weeks later, on a crisp November morning when the sky was impossibly blue. Georgia wore a dress made from the blue fabric Augustus had bought her, with lace trim that Mrs. Fletcher had helped her sew. Augustus wore a new suit that was slightly stiff and uncomfortable, but he would have worn a straitjacket if it meant standing beside Georgia and promising forever. The ceremony was small, attended by Dr. Morrison, Mrs. Fletcher, the sheriff, and a handful of students from Georgia's schoolhouse. The preacher, an elderly man who had seen countless couples join in matrimony, pronounced them husband and wife with a smile that suggested he recognized true love when he saw it. Augustus had used most of his savings to purchase a small house on the outskirts of town, a modest 2-room structure with a wood stove and a porch that faced west toward the hills. It was not much, but it was theirs. He carried Georgia over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down in the middle of their front room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Drake." She turned in a slow circle, taking in the simple furniture he had assembled. "It is perfect." That night, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Georgia traced the scar on Augustus's shoulder from an old knife fight. "Tell me about this one. Saloon dispute in Abilene. I was young and stupid and thought I had something to prove. And now I have everything I need right here." He kissed her temple. "Georgia, I want you to know something. Those names you called out during the fever, Thomas and Margaret and all the others, I do not care about your past. Whatever happened before, whoever hurt you, it does not matter to me. You are mine now and I am yours, and that is all that counts." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I spent so long thinking I was broken that Thomas leaving proved something was wrong with me, but you look at me like I am whole. You are whole. You are perfect." He pulled her closer, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "And I am going to spend every day proving that to you." Winter in Eagle Pass was mild compared to the Northern Territories, but there were still cold nights when the wind swept down from the hills and rattled the shutters. Augustus and Georgia would huddle close to the fire, her head on his shoulder, while he read aloud from the books she borrowed from the church library. She taught him to enjoy poetry, something he had always considered impractical before. He taught her to shoot, taking her out to the scrubland and showing her how to aim a rifle, insisting that any woman in Texas should know how to protect herself. Georgia continued teaching through the winter, her students adoring her despite her insistence on proper grammar and diligent study. Augustus took work breaking horses for a local rancher, dangerous work that paid well and left him with bruises he did not mention. They saved every penny they could spare, building toward the dream of their own ranch. In March, Georgia came home from the schoolhouse with news that made her eyes shine with excitement and fear in equal measure. "I am pregnant." Augustus swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the small front room until she was breathless with laughter. "When?" "Dr. Morrison says late September, early October most likely." He set her down carefully, as if she had suddenly become made of spun glass. "You should not be on your feet all day. You should rest. I am pregnant, not dying." She cupped his face in her hands. "Do not start treating me like I will break. I am stronger than I look." "I know you are strong. You survived being shot. You survived a fever that should have killed you. You survived heartbreak and betrayal and starting over in a strange place." He kissed her softly. but you are carrying our child now, and I am going to worry about you. That is what husbands do." Their son was born on a warm October evening as the sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Dr. Morrison attended the birth along with Mrs. Fletcher, who had appointed herself as grandmother figure despite no blood relation. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Augustus, pacing on the porch outside, feared he might lose them both. But Georgia proved her strength once again. When Dr. Morrison finally emerged to tell him he had a healthy son, Augustus nearly collapsed with relief. He was allowed into the room to find Georgia exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had sewn during her pregnancy. "Meet your son," she said softly. Augustus approached slowly, almost afraid to look, but when he saw the baby's face, red and scrunched and perfect, something in his chest cracked open. "He is so small. He is perfect." Georgia looked up at him. "I was thinking we could name him Thomas after your grandfather." Augustus had mentioned his paternal grandfather only once, a man he had loved dearly who died when Augustus was just a boy. The fact that Georgia had remembered, had chosen to honor that connection, moved him beyond words. "Thomas Drake," he said, testing the name. "I like it." He reached out carefully, letting his son's tiny fingers wrap around one of his much larger ones. The baby's grip was surprisingly strong, and Augustus felt the last piece of his heart that he had been keeping in reserve give itself over completely to this new life. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Augustus and Georgia's lives settled into a rhythm of work and love and small domestic joys. Augustus took on more work, including some deputy duties when the sheriff needed extra help during cattle drive season. Georgia continued teaching until Thomas was old enough to need her constant attention, then took in sewing work that she could do from home. They saved aggressively, and by the time Thomas turned 3, they had enough to make a down payment on a small ranch 15 miles outside Eagle Pass. The land was rough, mostly scrub and rock with a thin creek running through the eastern portion, but it had potential. Augustus threw himself into building their dream, constructing a barn and corrals, buying a small herd of cattle, breaking ground for a larger house. Georgia proved to be a natural rancher's wife, managing their accounts with precision, tending a vegetable garden that somehow thrived despite the harsh soil, teaching Thomas his letters while keeping an eye on the horizon for Augustus's return each evening. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they stood on the porch of their new house, larger and sturdier than the first, and looked out over land that was truly theirs. Thomas was asleep inside, worn out from helping his father mend fences. The sun was setting, as it did every evening, painting everything in warm light. "You ever think about that day I found you?" Augustus asked, his arm around Georgia's waist. She leaned into him. "Sometimes. It feels like another life now, like it happened to a different person." "You are a different person. We both are. Do you ever regret it? Taking on a strange woman with nothing but troubles?" He turned her to face him. "Georgia Drake, I have never regretted a single moment since I found you. You and Thomas are everything to me. If I had to go back and do it all again, the only thing I would change is I would have told you I loved you sooner." She smiled, rising up to kiss him. "You told me exactly when you needed to. Everything happened the way it was meant to happen." 3 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah, named after Augustus's mother. She came into the world easier than Thomas had, as if she knew her parents had already survived enough difficulty and was determined not to add to it. She had Georgia's copper hair and Augustus's dark eyes, and from the moment she could walk, she followed her father everywhere, determined to learn ranching despite her small size. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Augustus's reputation for fair dealing and Georgia's skill at managing their finances meant they weathered droughts and market downturns better than many of their neighbors. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the growing herd, good men who ate at their table and were treated like family. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved books as much as horses, a blend of both his parents. Sarah was wilder, always covered in dust, more comfortable in the barn than the house. Georgia taught them both reading, writing, and arithmetic. Augustus taught them to ride, to rope, to respect the land and animals in their care. On a warm evening in June when Thomas was 10 and Sarah 7, the family sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the western hills. It had become a tradition, this evening gathering, a time to be together before the children went to bed. "Papa," Sarah asked, "how did you and Mama meet?" Georgia and Augustus exchanged a glance. They had told the children an abbreviated version before, but Sarah was at an age where she wanted more details. "Your father saved my life," Georgia said simply. "From what?" Thomas asked, his interest caught. Augustus pulled Sarah onto his lap. "From some bad men who attacked the stagecoach your mother was traveling on. I found her hurt and brought her to the doctor." "Were you scared, Mama?" Sarah's dark eyes were wide. "I was terrified. I was alone in a strange place, and I thought I was going to die." Georgia looked at Augustus. "But your father stayed with me. Even when I was so sick I did not know where I was, he held my hand and told me I would be all right, and I believed him." "Because Papa does not lie," Thomas said with the certainty of a child who had never been deceived by his father. "No, he does not." Georgia smiled. "And then, once I was better, he helped me start a new life here. He gave me hope when I thought I had lost everything." Augustus shifted Sarah to one arm so he could reach for Georgia's hand. "Your mother is being modest. She is the strongest person I know. She survived something that would have broken most people, and she built a whole new life. I just got lucky enough to be part of it." "That is not luck," Thomas said with a child's wisdom. "That is love." "You are right," Augustus agreed. "That is love." The years continued to roll past like the cattle drives that still passed near their ranch, constant, but always changing. Thomas went to study law in San Antonio at 16, determined to bring justice to the wild territories in a different way than his father had. Sarah stayed on the ranch, taking over more and more of its management, proving herself as capable as any man. Augustus's hair turned gray at the temples, and George's copper locks gained threads of silver, but the way he looked at her never changed. Every morning, he kissed her before heading out to work. Every evening, he came home to her like a man returning to sanctuary. When Thomas graduated and opened a law practice in San Antonio, they traveled to celebrate with him. When Sarah married one of their ranch hands, a good man named Daniel who loved her wild spirit, they hosted a wedding on the ranch that lasted 2 days and filled the house with joy. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Georgia and Augustus took a rare day away from the ranch, riding out to the spot where he had first found her. The old stagecoach road was barely visible now, reclaimed by scrub grass and mesquite. They stood there in the afternoon sun, older and grayer but still holding hands like young lovers. "You remember what I said to you that day?" Augustus asked. "You told me to hold on. You told me you had me." Georgia squeezed his hand. "And you did. You have had me every day since. I am going to keep having you, for as long as you will let me." She turned to him, and he saw tears on her cheeks. "Augustus Drake, you are stuck with me forever, in this life and whatever comes after." He kissed her there, in the place where their story began, sealing the promise they had made 25 years before and every day since. When they rode back to the ranch, the sun was setting behind them, painting their shadows long across the land they had built together. Sarah gave them their first grandchild the following spring, a boy she named Augustus, after his grandfather. Georgia cried when she held him for the first time, this new life that carried their legacy forward. Augustus stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, both of them marveling at the continuation of their story. Thomas married a schoolteacher from San Antonio 2 years later, a sharp woman who could argue law as well as he could. They gave Georgia and Augustus 2 more grandchildren, a girl and a boy. The ranch house that had once seemed so large now filled regularly with visiting children and laughter. On a cool evening in late October, when Augustus was 54 and Georgia 51, they sat on their porch in the rocking chairs that had become their thrones. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and well-tended, a testament to decades of hard work. Sarah and Daniel lived in a house they had built on the eastern edge of the property. Thomas visited monthly from San Antonio with his family. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not found you that day?" Augustus asked. Georgia reached across the space between their chairs to take his hand. "I try not to. That day gave me everything. It gave me you and Thomas and Sarah and this life we have built. Before that day, I was running away from pain. After it, I was running toward something better." "The fever dreams," he said quietly. "That first night you called out so many names, people who had hurt you or left you. I wanted to fight them all for you. You did fight them. Every time you held me and told me I was safe, you were fighting them. Every time you loved me without reservation, you were proving they were wrong." She smiled at him. "Those names do not have power anymore, Augustus. You gave me new names to hold on to. Husband, father, partner. Those are the only names that matter now." Augustus stood, pulling her up from her chair and into his arms. They swayed together slowly, dancing to music only they could hear, the same dance they had been doing for 26 years. The sunset painted them in gold and amber, 2 people who had found each other in the wilderness and built something permanent. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I love you more. Not possible." She laughed, the sound as bright as the first time he had heard it. "We could argue about this all night. I've got nothing better to do than spend time with my beautiful wife." They stood there on their porch as the stars began to emerge, holding each other the same way he had held her through those long fever nights so many years before. The difference was that now she was holding him back just as tightly, both of them supporting each other, both of them safe in the shelter they had created together. Inside the house, lamps were being lit. In the distance, cattle lowed softly as they settled for the night. The ranch that Augustus and Georgia had built continued its steady rhythm, a living thing that would outlast them both, carrying their legacy and their love forward through generations yet to come. As they finally went inside for the evening, Augustus paused at the doorway, looking back at the land one more time. He thought about that day in August of 1878 when he had been tracking bandits and found something infinitely more valuable instead. He thought about the woman with fever-bright eyes who had whispered names he did not know while he held her and promised she would survive. She had survived. They both had. And in surviving, they had done something more remarkable than simply continuing to breathe. They had built a life of profound meaning, a love that had weathered every storm, a family that would carry their story forward long after they were gone. Georgia appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" "About how lucky I am. How everything I have came from one decision to bring a dying woman to a doctor instead of chasing bandits." "Not luck," she corrected gently. "Choice. You chose to save me. I chose to trust you. We chose to love each other every single day. That is not luck, my love. That is grace." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Grace it is, then." They went inside together, closing the door on another day in a life full of them, each one a gift they never took for granted. The fever dreams that had once made her scream out names were long gone, replaced by peaceful sleep beside a man who had held her through the worst and stayed for all the best that came after. In the bedroom they had shared for over 2 decades, Augustus helped Georgia out of her dress, his hand still gentle despite the calluses. She braided her silver-streaked hair while he pulled off his boots. They had performed these small rituals thousands of times, but familiarity had not bred contempt. Instead, it had deepened into something more precious than passion, a comfort that came from truly knowing another person and being known in return. They lay down together in the darkness, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. Through the window, they could see the stars scattered across the Texas sky like diamonds on black velvet. "You remember that poem I used to read to you?" Georgia asked. "The one about love being patient and kind, I remember. You read it the first winter we were married. I have been thinking about it lately, about how it says love never fails." She traced patterns on his chest. "I used to think that was naive. After Thomas left me, I thought love was just a pretty lie people told themselves. But then you found me, and you loved me, and you never stopped. You proved that poem right." Augustus tightened his arm around her. "You made it easy to love you. You still do, even when I am old and gray. Especially then, though you are neither old nor gray in my eyes." She laughed softly. "You are a terrible liar, Augustus Drake. Then I am lucky I am married to a woman who loves me anyway." They fell silent, simply breathing together, their heartbeats synchronizing the way they had thousands of nights before. Outside, a coyote called to the moon. Inside, 2 people who had saved each other continued their quiet vigil, holding on through the darkness the way they always had, the way they always would. When Augustus finally fell asleep, Georgia stayed awake a little longer, memorizing the feel of him beside her. She thought about the girl she had been on that stagecoach, broken and bleeding and screaming names into the fever dark. She thought about the cowboy who had found her and refused to let her die, who had held her through every nightmare and loved her through every day that followed. That girl was gone now, transformed by love and time and the life they had built together. In her place was a woman who knew her own strength, who had raised children and run a ranch and loved a man so thoroughly that she could not remember where she ended and he began. "Thank you," she whispered to the sleeping man beside her. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for loving me." Augustus, though asleep, pulled her closer, as if even in dreams he understood his most important job was keeping her safe and loved. Georgia smiled in the darkness and closed her eyes, surrendering to sleep in the arms that had held her through everything. The arms that would continue holding her through whatever came next. Their story, which had begun with a gunshot and fever dreams and names called out in delirium, had become something beautiful. A story of survival and choice and the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. A story that would be passed down through their children and grandchildren, growing with each telling, a testament to what 2 people could build when they chose each other against all odds. In the morning, they would wake together as they had done for 26 years. Augustus would kiss Georgia before rising to start his day. She would make coffee while he tended the animals. They would share breakfast and make plans and live another day of their extraordinary, ordinary life. But for now, they slept peacefully in their bed. 2 souls who had found each other in the wilderness and never let go. 2 hearts beating as one beneath the endless Texas sky, their love story complete and perfect and entirely their own.